We're in this conversation, which is a question mark, called Let Us Pray, and we are rediscovering an ancient practice in a modern world. So we've been going at this since the start of the new year, and really we're just asking a simple question. Can prayer still be a meaningful, helpful, and transformative practice for us? That's the question. Now, we have walked through a lot of different ways to look at prayer. Perhaps many of you, we've discussed this, but this word prayer carries a lot of baggage with it. And for me, I know it feels like it's been weaponized a lot. Most of the time when people said they're praying for me, I just didn't feel like it was very good intentions behind it. It was like a weapon, like I'm praying for you. You know what I'm talking about? Like praying you get your life right? And sometimes they would even threaten it, like praying God gives you whatever you need to wake up. You know what I mean? Like, oh, okay. And so we're just kind of taking a different look at it and trying to rediscover. And we're just asking, as we transcend and include, as we're all ever evolving, as we're all growing, moving into these progressive spaces, we're going back to some of the practices that our parents handed us, and we're just saying, is there still validity to it? Is there still validity to baptism? Is there still validity to this table? Is there still validity to prayer? Is there still validity to all these things that we were handed? And then maybe if there is, maybe there's a different way to look at it. Maybe there's another way to kind of keep turning this thing and seeing different angles of it. So today what I want to do, because we've been talking about prayer as like a practice. We started talking about practice of lament, which I don't do. I'm not much of a prayer person, but I do have a regular practice of lament. Then we talked about prayer as sending and receiving energies, which might have been my favorite, all right? So when like Paul writes and he's like, grace, love, and peace be with you. What is he doing? He's sending some energies, all right? And then, so we talked about that. Then last week, I have to thank Kent Dobson. Did you guys enjoy Kent? He was here last week, all right? Kent was here, and Kent talked about prayer as a practice of listening, all right? So instead of just talking or trying to figure out who am I talking to, maybe it has more to do with listening than speaking. So what I want to do now, I have just 2 final installments, all right? And I was going to just make it one, but I need to do it in the context of a very famous prayer that Jesus gives, and I had to do it justice, so I need to do 2. So we'll do today, and today I want to talk about prayer as a practice of grounding, all right? So that's where we're heading today. Next week will be our final talk on this conversation, and I want to take that phrase that you've heard politicians say, thoughts and prayers, all right? So we need to talk about that because that's problematic, all right? When politicians get up and there's another shooting and they're like, well, I'm just giving thoughts and prayers, all right? So let's talk about that because Jesus actually talks a little bit about thoughts and prayers, turns out, all right? It's in the Greek, all right? But we'll get there, all right? So today, prayer as a practice of grounding. Now, to do this and next week, I want to place it, I want to set it in what you, even if you're not a part of church or you're a strong atheist, wherever you come from the spiritual perspective, most people are familiar with this prayer. It's known as the Lord's Prayer. You've heard this. Or if you grew up Catholic, you probably know it as Our Father, right? This is the prayer that in every Scorsese film, right at the end when they're dying, they quote this prayer, all right? You know what I'm talking about? Like, this is the prayer you need to memorize, so when you're lying at Wellstar and you're about to go into this next space of whatever that looks like, and you're about to take your last breath, they call Pastor Cody, all right? And Pastor Cody shows up, and he's like, what's going on? And I come in with a little bit too high energy because you're dying, all right? And I come in there, and everybody's crying, and hear me, it's a grieving process, it's sad. I also just pull back a couple layers, and I'm like, I mean, I know we're sad, but you probably should have seen this coming. We're all going to die, all right? Like, I want to throw that out there, all right? So it will inevitably come for you, and it will come for me, all right? So this, if anything, just don't be surprised when you're on your deathbed, like, I can't believe this is happening. Did you think you were going to be the only one that didn't die, right? Like, no. If we normalize death, it might help us cope with it a little bit, all right? So you're there, and they call the pastor in. Kate and I we've done our share of deathbed experiences, all right? And quite frankly, there's some of my favorite things to do. I love weddings are my favorite, and death is my favorite, all right? which is why I knew I was called to be a pastor, all right? It's like, man, that guy's messed up, all right? But we have sat at deathbed experiences, and sometimes we're like, Katie, will you sing a song? Will you sing Amazing Grace, break out Amazing Grace, or whatever? And sometimes like, Pastor, you got a word for us? And I'm like, okay. And it always, it's like, let's go. Can you recite the Our Father? And I'm like, do I have it memorized? And then what version do I have it memorized in? I don't know, okay? So this is a very famous prayer, all right? Now, you need to know something about this prayer. The entire prayer is only 66 words in the Greek, or 57 words in the Greek, 66 in English, all right? It's found in Matthew 6, and it's found in Luke 11. Sits at the center of what we call the Sermon of the Mount, all right? So in Matthew 6, it's called the Sermon on the Mount we're about to read. It's 116 Greek lines before and 114 Greek lines after in this Sermon on the Mount. So these writers know exactly what they're doing, these authors. They placed it right at the center, okay? I find it interesting because in Luke's version, they say Jesus teaches how to pray, and he goes into this, okay? Now, Rabbi Jesus is giving us insight into something I think is crucial for us. This rabbi is showing his followers how he survives with longevity. It's as if he's giving us an insight into a little bit of a secret, which isn't much of a secret, but if you want sustainability, if you find yourself either like loads of energy or burnout crash mode, but you need some sustainability, if you're going the distance, if you realize it's like this full marathon you're running, then you're going to need to know something. And it's like Jesus says, I need to show my followers this because life is hard. It's going to get extremely difficult. And there are going to be days where you throw up the white flag and you're over it. But I need you to know you have a gift to give to the world. You do. I believe this. Whoever you are, you came in here today, I need you to hear me. You have a gift to give to the world. We need you here. Do you understand that? We need you here. We need you here in this space, Vinings Lake. We need you here in Mableton. We need you here in Atlanta. We need you here. The cosmos, the earth, needs you here. I say that with full authority because if we didn't need you here, you wouldn't be here. But you're here, and we need you here. And we don't just need you here. We need you here, dialed in, using all your best energies to do the work you're here to do. Okay? And no one's work is over. Can we say that? Because some of you are like, well, my kids just left the house. I guess I'm done. Nope. No, you're just getting started, all right? If you're here and you're in your 70s and you're like, listen, I'm retiring, settle down, young man. All right, no, you have work to do. No one graduates. Until you're gone, you are here, and there is a reason you are here, right? So we need you dialed in. So if you're going to make it for the long haul, then it might be helpful to know that maybe there are some practices that Jesus is showing his followers going, yep, this is how you're going to make it through life, all right? Now, that said, let's pick up. This is Matthew 6, verse 5. And whenever you pray, do not be like the hypocrites. That's like a Greek theater term they used to put on these masks. Do not be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and at the street corners so that they may be seen by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward. But whenever you pray, go into your room, shut the door, and pray to your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. And when you are praying, do not heap up empty phrases as the Gentiles do, for they think they will be heard because of their many words. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him, which begs the question, why ask? All right? And I would answer and just say maybe the reason is because it's not about asking, it's about listening. All right? Okay. Verse 8, do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask them. Pray then in this way. Here it is. Drum roll, you know this one. Our Father in heaven. Oh, come on. I mean, do we? Okay, here's the problem. This is the New Revised Standard Version updated edition. So I'm fairly certain it's probably not going to be the one we're going to quote. But yes, it goes like this. Our Father who art in heaven. Okay, okay. My work here is done. I'm so proud of y'all. You also need to know that little thing at the end, for thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory of it, is actually not in the, I don't want to ruin it for you, but that's not actually in the original. It was added on as like an addendum that was added later, which is great if you find it helpful, okay? All right. Okay, let's take this prayer for just, let's take it for the next 2 Sundays. The first part is all I want to talk about, okay? Jesus talks to his students, and Jesus says, if you're going to pray, maybe here's like a model. It's almost like Jesus, like, I want to show you kind of how I do it, okay? Jesus starts with this phrase, our Father. Now, I just want to park here for a minute. The actual original Greek reads more like this, Father of us. I understand that when I use that word Father, first of all, let's acknowledge this up front. That's a patriarchal language, okay? This is a patriarchal society. You know this. We've talked about the evolution of consciousness when these texts are written, okay? This reflects a first century state of consciousness. And so if you're here and you're like, God seems all patriarchal, and I know there's conversations about God as mother, you actually find the metaphor as God as mother in the book of Isaiah as well. So it isn't just Father, right? But Jesus certainly uses this language, Father. Now, I say all that to say, again, you know this, but it's worth repeating. All language used for the ultimate, all language used for ultimacy, all language used for the divine, all language used for that of which we cannot speak, but yet we keep speaking, all of it is metaphor, all right? All of it. And people all the time like, you can't call God mother. The fact that you're calling God God is a metaphor. Do you understand that? There is no one single word that can contain the formless divine, all right? And I also want you to know the divine transcends all gender. I want you to know that, all right? So that may be a surprise to you if you die and you're like, wait a minute, I thought God was an old white male. Nope, turns out God isn't, right? In fact, the writer in the Johannine community says God is spirit. So you tell me about spirit. The last I heard, spirit is formless. So what is spirit? Yeah, is it spirit in the shape of a human form? I don't know. All right, so we start there, just acknowledge that. But I also think it's really critical that we hang on to this phrase, all right? So understanding it's in a patriarchal culture, but at the same time holding to it because there is some sense of power in the first century when you said this word, our Father, or Father of us. In the first century, fathers were the person who had the power. In the first century, fathers ran the household. Fathers also were known to show love for their children by protecting them and providing for them. So when you read this phrase, when you hear that, our Father, when you're repeating this, our Father, or Father of us, maybe it's almost as if this rabbi is teaching his students going, you know what? The best thing for you to do is pull aside, go to a separate space, find a moment, and just start there. That you are not alone in this thing called existence. And that there is a force, a power, there is something larger than yourself that, and I want to be clear, loves you and is generous toward you and is working for your own growth. Now, you can call that Father, you can call that Mother, you can call that universe, you can call that whatever you want. As Father Rohr says, God isn't hung up on you getting God's name right. God knows who God is. It's us that do not know. And so whatever language has the least amount of baggage, I would say whatever language feels the safest to you, use that language. So when you approach, it's as if Jesus is going, start there. Sit, ground yourself in that moment that you're not alone. You may feel like the only person walking through whatever it is you're walking through right this second. I want you to know you're not alone. You have a Father Even if you're in this room and you didn't grow up with a father, you have a father. Or maybe you're here and you're like, my father was absolute nonsense, all right? Yeah. What is it, the father that you dreamed you had? What did you wish your father was going to be like? Place all that on the ineffable. It's your father to the 10th power. It's your father that's absolutely, actually the father you dreamed of having. Yes, that innate craving that you never got from your father, this father has. I want you to know God's fundamental posture towards you is one of generosity, pleasure, and love. This term father is an affectionate term used by a son or daughter or child to a loving guardian. And in some ways, it's almost like Jesus is telling his students, find you a space and sit or stand calmly before the presence of love. And remind yourself, your body memories, remind them, refresh them with this truth, that there is a divine source that is called love, and it's actually perfect love. And this love is here. It's present. It's with you. And in that sense, maybe we could say this. Maybe prayer can be a way of practicing grounding ourselves in an affirmation of love, in an affirmation of hope. Maybe prayer can be a practice of finding our safe, secure, and calm center. It's not uncommon for you to hear me use language like this. Center yourself. What does that mean? It may not mean for me like I'm going to bow my head and close my eyes. Centering myself means just pausing and almost taking a step out of whatever it is that I'm in this moment, taking a step on a little bit of a firmer foundation and just kind of standing and becoming aware that there is a love that is present. A Father that has strength, that has power, that can provide, that knows what you need before you ask. That is a wild thought to me, that perhaps the universe knows what you need before you ask. But yet we still stand and we remind ourselves of this. Our Father. And I love this phrase, holy is your name. Now, you need to know something about like first century particularly, but even now, there's a sacred reverence around the name of God. And devout Jews even refrain from using the phrase God often or Yahweh. In fact, what you find even in history is they would substitute the name Yahweh because they felt that it was so holy and reverential and just powerful that they would use maybe even like the phrase Adonai. But they would refuse to use Yahweh. I love how we always walk around and we just like people's like, well, why don't you call it God? You call it the divine. Well, maybe for me I'm doing that because there's so much baggage that's come with God. I think it's part of that. But I also think maybe part of it is also there's a little bit of a holy hum and reverence. That's like maybe that word is so sacred. Maybe the idea of it is so sacred that for me it feels best to use this word divine, right? The idea I think that Jesus is giving us here is something really interesting. He begins his prayer by acknowledging source. He begins his prayer by returning to the sacredness of source. It's like Jesus starts, he says, Our Father, the one who runs the household, the one who has complete control, the one who provides, the one who is in essence love. Holy is your name. Remind me, ground me in the sacredness that is all things. This is like Jesus telling his students to return regularly to the energy, power, and force that sustains and cares for everything. And I want to pause here and ask you, do you have a regular practice of returning to the energy, power, and force that sustains and cares for everything? It's been my experience that it's easy to lose connection to the sacredness, depth, and meaning of all life. It's easy. And particularly in our culture, it's real easy. When you have phones and you have all these gadgets, like it's easy to lose connection, right? It's easy to go through life and to find yourself so preoccupied with whatever is on your schedule, whatever is next, whatever you have going, to lose connection to the depth of it all, to the meaning of it all, to the sacredness of it all. And perhaps that's why you're a part of a collective like this, is because you say, I need to come once a week for this guy to stand up just to remind me that existence is absurd. It is absurd. We've normalized it. I keep saying it. I'm going to keep saying it. It is absurd. All of this is. It's okay to acknowledge that. The absurdity of life, that we're all here. And I remember as a kid thinking, God, school days lasted forever. You get there so early. Then you just sit in that first period class, and you're just like, oh my God, I'm going to be here all day? And the teacher gets up, and you've got like 7 subjects you're going to walk through. And has it ever occurred to you all, you don't just do that one day, but then you do it the next day, and then the next day, and then by like day 3, I'm going, oh my God, I'm going to be here all year? Do you remember, did y'all have these feelings as a kid? Going, I'm going to be in this desk, sitting here all year? I couldn't fathom it. As a kid, I was like, there's no, and this is where part of my anxiety, I would start going to anxiety attacks, because it felt like it was very similar to how the evangelicals used to tell me, when you die and you wake up in hell, you're going to be there for eternity. That's what school felt like. I was like, I'm going to be here all year? And the days lasted forever. I was just recently talking to someone about this. I'm like, God, I remember planning things. But like I would plan them, like, what are you going to do? I'd plan it, but then get it done in like 2 days. And now at 42, when I plan things, it takes 2 to 3 months. Do you know what I'm talking about? And then 2 to 3 months goes by like the old 2 to 3 days used to. So I say something like, hey, you want to get together? Let's get together. Let's do this. Let's go have lunch. And then literally the next thing I know, 2 months have gone by. And what used to seem so long, like, oh my God, we're going to be here all year. This is going to take forever. The world seemed to rotate on its axis at a very snail's pace. And then all of a sudden, and I just need you to know this if you're young in here, people told me this, but I didn't understand it. And maybe you don't understand it until you happen and experience it. But then you get older, and all of a sudden, like at 42 now, midlife-ish. I mean, if I'm banking off of my grandparents, I've only got 15 left. You know what I'm talking about? Like, my grandparents went early. Like, my grandfather's 60-something, 61 maybe. Like, so I'm just saying, and now I'm at a space in my life where I'm like, my God, how is January over? I had plans for January. Do you know what I'm saying? I had like bucket list New Year's items and resolutions for January, and now it's just gone. And I'm like, what happened? Now it's February. And I get why John Mayer writes songs about trying to get off the train. I do. Those songs have new meaning to me now. I'm like, yes, I've been trying to jump off the train forever. Been trying to jump off the train. I don't understand why the train's picking up speed. I didn't ask for this. And yet here we are. And this thing is just moving. And it's such a strange, bizarre thing, because you go through life and then you just like, and it speeds, and then you come to the end of your life and you realize, oh my God, this thing is happening so quickly. And the reality is, as I look back, And I think, like, the wisdom tradition, I'm starting to realize, this is when you know you're getting old, hang on, that some of the things my parents handed me, there was a lot of truth to. Yeah, and all the parents in here are like, yeah, all right? Because though, yeah, I grew up in a evangelical culture where, like, you reading your Bible and having prayer every day was a sign of how spiritual you were. And what I mean by that is the length at which you did that was a sign of the depth of your spirituality, okay? So if you spend an hour praying and 30 minutes reading the biblical narrative, well, like, you had potential to be the next Mother Teresa. Do you know what I'm talking about? And all of that came with all kinds of strings, because it wasn't just that, but it was also like, but if you don't do it, then are you even a Christian? Do you know what I'm saying? And yeah, I had to reject all of that. But as I transcended, like as we transcend, and now we look back and we're like, well, what do we need to include? Here's what I will say. I have great love and gratitude for something my parents did hand me. Somewhere in the midst of all of that tangledness, there was a kernel of goodness there. That I'm like, somehow, the one thing they taught me, and they would have never called it this, but they taught me the importance of grounding. And here's what I mean. They're like, before you get into the chaos of your life, before whatever comes at you, just like take a moment, just pause, ground yourself in something larger than yourself. Reconnect your body, plug it in to the electricity. Now, they didn't word it like that, but that's how I understand it now. That what drives me, what keeps my heart beating, what keeps the train going, John Mayer, what keeps the thing moving forward, is that there is an energy, an electricity, there is something that was way back when everything was all one and it was a small little black dot. Before the combustion of the Big Bang, there was some sense of energy that exploded everything. And this is why we need volunteers in the kids area, because you had a force of energy that caused you to get with your partner. And you produced more humans that also now have forces of energy. And you see what happened? It just, this dot, and then poof. And it is the thing that is, it is the electricity, the energy, the power, the force that's moving everything forward. And my parents taught me something interesting. And I had to get rid of the narrative and the Our Father, just push all that aside, because I didn't understand all that. But I'll tell you what I did understand. I am exhausted. Okay? What if you plugged into the electricity? Now, that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. What does that look like for you? Jesus, teaching his students, says, hey, take a moment, ground yourself, plug your body into the source, the glue, the force that sustains and runs everything. That explosion at the Big Bang, what if I told you you could tap into that power? Now, if you're like me, you're like, yes, sign me up. Because most days I feel like a cell phone on about 3%. And I'm on a long call, and I'm like, oh, I don't have the juice in the pack to go on. I'm tired. All right? What if you plugged yourself in every morning? Now, what does that mean for you? I don't know. Perhaps it's music for me. I've told you this before. For me, it's running. It's music. For me, it's plugging myself in means I need to walk outside and stand there in my green grass. All right? Now, let me just share this, and then we'll pull it together here, all right? I think this will be worth your time. Now, let me say something about the practice of grounding as it looks for me. Then I want to show you just what Jesus did, because I think you'll find it interesting, all right? So, me first, then Jesus. Okay. I've missed y'all. Y'all are great. Okay. A couple weeks ago, I shared a story about this kind of moment with sending and receiving energies. And I told you that I met Katie. If you weren't there, you can go back and listen. It was a couple weeks ago. I met Katie, and the place that she took me to was the place that I had envisioned that she was at. It was a very surreal, just proper level of woo type moment, right? I also just very quickly said something to you that most of you probably didn't even think about. Maybe you did, but I told you I took my shoes off in that moment. That was the first time in my life I ever became a hippie, all right? Like genuinely embraced my hippiness, all right? I took my shoes off. This grass was just radiant. It was just as green as green has ever been. And from that moment, taking my shoes off became a bit of a practice for me. Now, I'm not fundamental about it, all right? It's not like, well, if you don't do it on Monday, you're going to have a terrible week, all right? You can't be fundamental. People, you got to loosen your grip. Some of y'all, there's the sermon. Just loosen the grip a little bit. Loosen your grip. And honestly, I'm going to tell you this. You're not in control anyways. Control, you know this. Control is an illusion. Don't deceive yourself. All right? Loosen it up. You're so clenched. Even right now. Can we just do that for a minute? Can you just... First of all, do this. This is what my therapist used to do to me. She'd say, tighten your fist right now. Just tighten it. Yes. And just loosen it up just a little bit. Loosen it up. Yeah, just loosen it. If you want to. If some of you are like, that's too weird, I don't do crowd participation, just relax. You're the one we're talking to here, all right? You're the very ones who are like, I don't do crowd participation. Just loosen up. Loosen it up, all right? Loosen it up. It's going to be fine, all right? And so I started this practice. And I started doing it once a day. There's no routine to it. I just do it regularly. But I'll walk outside. I recently had to resod my yard. It wasn't like a bucket list item. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like, what you going to do this year? I'm going to spend all my money resodding my yard. The HOA called me and also, I live down the street. I'm a pastor here. It's like, you know what I mean? Like, that's Pastor Cody's yard. Looks like awful. And so I was like, we got to, it's part of it. Welcome to America. And so I resodded, and it just, God, it looks so beautiful. And I say that past tense. It's struggling already, but it did look so beautiful. And I would take my shoes off, and this is regular practice. Katie would know. She's like, and I usually do it like Katie and I would make dinner at the house, and about that time, I would sometimes just grab a drink, whatever, and walk outside. And I'd go check my mailbox first, and then I'd walk over to my grass, and I would my shoes would be off, and I would just stand there. And the way my house sits, the sun starts here, works its way over, and that way in the front yard, about the time the sun's going down, I'll just stand there, and I'll just, here's the thing that I want you to know. I'm just grounding myself. Now, I mean quite literally grounding. My feet are touching the soil of the earth. And then I'll do something really interesting. It's one of my favorite things to do. I will close my eyes, and I will lift my head. And sometimes I really have to lift my head because unconsciously I've been walking around with it down. And a part of that is because, I don't know if you know this, but the new Pharaoh is this. You need to know that. I'm not saying it's like evil in itself, but I am telling you this is what it means to be enslaved. These are the modern day bricks that you're building for Pharaoh. And so if you notice, you even see postures of Homo sapiens, right? Bending over. We're devolving back. Do you know what I'm saying? And so I don't take this out. I go, and then I will intentionally raise my body up. I'll pull my shoulders back, and then I will close my eyes, and I will lift my head and my face up to the sun. And I will just hang with me. If you're like, this is kind of weird, I will feel the warmth of the sun on my body. And sometimes I'll just pause in that, and that's all the reminder I need that there's an energy, force, glue, electricity that's running this entire thing. And sometimes I will out loud just whisper, "Fill me, inspire me, energize me." Sometimes I'll just stand there because I'm so anxious that day that I'll just pause and I let the warmth of that love just kind of flow down my body. And in some way, the warmth of the sun brings some sense of safety and security for me. So it's kind of like being in all of that anxious busyness. I just take a moment and I ground my body on the electricity that's running everything, and then I'll lift my face up and I'll just be like, breathe in the safety. Breathe in the calm of it. And there's also a part of me that I need you to know this. It's almost like there's a faithfulness to the sun that I haven't seen in any other relationship. Do you know what I mean? Just about the time my cynicism's taking over and I think the whole world's going to hell, I'm reminded maybe there is something larger than myself that's running this thing. I will tell you this, the sun sure seems to be faithful. Now, I know some of you here, you're like into science. You're like, "Yeah, but coming, it's going to burn up." That's not helping anxiety, all right? That's not, no. Stop that, all right? I don't want to hear it, all right? For now, there's a faithfulness to it. That's why the week before last was so hard for me. I don't know if you know this, but we had like 15-degree days. Playing golf with friends this week, we talked about, is it just me or is winter hard? And then, of course, my New England friends just laugh. They're like, "Oh, winter? You call that winter?" Yes. Stop comparing suffering. Winter's been a little hard. It's not that, it's just been a little hard. I don't know. Katie and I talk about it all the time. I don't know how my friends in New England do it. I used to speak up there all the time. We'd go, it'd be 4 feet of snow. They never leave their house. Pale as a ghost. Never leave their house. I'm just like, my God. Is it? And so we went from that cold side, and then it rained. Atlanta is just loving rain. It just rains. And then this, I told Katie on Friday or Saturday, I said, "Katie, I just pulled up the map. I'm getting in the car, and I'm going to drive however long I have to until I meet the sunshine." All right? Katie's like, "Pull up the map." Turns out the sun was about 500 miles away. And I was like, well, I could book a flight, get on it, because when you get above the clouds. And then it dawned on me, not to be like super like Mr. Rogers, but I do want you to know, even when it's thundering outside, you do know the sun's still out, right? And just hang with the metaphor a little bit, but is there anything more thrilling than when you're flying out of Atlanta and it's just chaos and that thing's flying around and you're like, "I'm going to be sick," and all of a sudden you break through, you're broke through, and then you're up above it? Come on now, give me a sermon. It's in there somewhere. We'll pick it apart, all right? If you fly above it. And it was like raining, and then Monday, all those clouds just kind of moved out of the way. And I'll tell you what I did. I told Katie, I was like, stop. And I know not everybody can do this, but I canceled work. I canceled my meet, everything. I just canceled it all. My dad came into town. It's like, "What you going to do?" "We're going to play golf." My dad and I went to play golf, and I'm telling you something. It was a little cold, you know. I was playing golf with my dad, and I held my son up to the face. My face up to the sun, just like, "Just give it to me. Just like this light. Give it to me." Like letting that energy flow. Now, I say that to say there's like a calming factor there, okay? My dad starts the fight of his life tomorrow. He starts chemo. I've told you my dad was diagnosed with cancer, sebaceous carcinoma, whatever is in his eye. They're probably going to remove his eye, all that stuff. So he came about his situation. You know, are you scared? Anybody who's ever been in here and had to go through radiation or chemo or cancer in general, you know, it's a terrifying thing. It's natural. Are you scared? And then we would talk about it and we'd move on. And I would beat him at a hole and then we'd move on. And we just kept doing that. And then we'd come back around. It's like, my dad was like, I'm going to lose my hair. All those conversations, I'm going to lose my hair. He said, doctor asked him what his head looks like. Dad was like, I don't know. I've always had hair. I have no idea. And I was just kind of looking at my dad's head. It's like, I wonder if it's going to be like pointy or if it's going to be, you know what I'm talking about? Like, these are all real questions, right? My mom went through the same thing, but she wore like a little wig, like had her wig thing on. My dad's like, I was like, Dad, you just wear hats. Just wear hats if you want to. Or better yet, just know you're who the divine has made you to be and walk out with utter full confidence and no insecurity. You're going to be just fine. And but it was really interesting because my dad and I share a lot of our similar anxieties. And we laughed, we had a good time, and at the end, he was driving back to Tennessee, and he starts rehashing again. You know, I'll let you know how it goes. They put his port in. He's like, I'll let you know how it goes. And then I just went in right at the end. And I want you to know, father, son, this isn't the easiest thing for us to do. Now, I'd imagine you know that world, right? Any guardian, like it's hard. But you lay down all that stuff, and then you go in, and we're standing in the parking lot of a golf course in Austell. And I kind of hugged, but we lingered a little longer than normal. Do you know what I'm talking about? And I remember just pausing like, if I could somehow send energy through my body inside that port through his body, right? And it suddenly occurred to me, my dad gets in the car and he's just joking and laughing. And I was like, my God, he's good. He's fine. So I'm just saying this to you. You lost your job. You're looking for a new one. You've got something going on. You've got a relationship situation. Oh, here's the thing. Just pause yourself, whatever is coming. Just what if you had a regular practice of grounding yourself, plugging yourself back up into the energy and electricity that runs it all? Here's what I'm trying to say, and we're out, okay? Prayer can be a way to reconnect with the depths, fullness, and vitality of life. Prayer can be a way to reunite and reconnect us with the sacred depth, holiness, and significance of life. Prayer can be a way to ground ourselves in those moments where we come to the end of ourselves, when we're exhausted and we have no more power to go on. It can be a practice of us just plugging our bodies back in, acknowledging, like our AA brothers and sisters do, that there is a power larger than myself. I surrender, I submit, I give all of this up to that, and I ground myself in something larger, and I say, energize me, fill me, give me whatever sustenance I need to make it to the next day. Now, let me close here, okay? You doing okay? Everybody good? Okay, great. Thanks, Kevin. Here we go. I have a regular practice of grounding. Jesus also had a regular practice of grounding, okay? Jesus often pulled away from the noise to find silence and solitude. I just want you to know that. You don't have to spiritualize it. A rabbi in the first century had a regular practice of pulling away from the noise into a space of solitude and silence. You don't believe me? Mark 1:35. Mark 1:35. In the morning, while it was still very dark, he got up and went to a deserted place. There he prayed. Matthew 14:23. And after he had dismissed the crowds, he went up into the mountain by himself to pray. I just asked this question. If Jesus had to go out of his way to find silence in the first century, how much more do we? If Jesus had to go out of the way to find silence in the first century, how much more should we? And so I do my best to clean out the clutter and have a regular practice of grounding. And in those moments, what I'm telling you is I'm talking about no outside stimuli. I have, in moments, chosen I'm not going to read a book. I don't need any noise. No podcast, no music, no nothing, just silence. I know for many of you, you're like, that's a very privileged thing because I have 25 kids. And I'm also going to say to you what someone should have said to you a long time ago. It's your own fault. No one forced you to have those babies. You chose it, okay? This is the life you have created. I will also say to you, if that is you, I want you to know, I think a regular practice of grounding is more important than you than anyone in this room. You've got a bunch of kids that you're raising, small humans, and they need you dialed in. They need you fully energized. They need you at your best. And I'm not saying it's always going to be perfect, but I am saying if you got a shot at the next 18 years of raising humans, you might want to find time to carve some moment out, even if it's for a second, to ground yourself into the electricity that runs everything. And you say, why pull away? Because when you pull away, nothing is competing or demanding your attention. But the reality is, studies have found that an average group can only bear about 15 seconds of silence. My wife and I go round and round about this conversation. We're driving somewhere long distance. She'd be like, immediately, it can be 6 a.m, just Spotify jamming. And I'm just in the car, and sometimes I was just like, hey, I want her to do it, but I'm like, hey, can we just, it's 6 a.m, can Justin Timberlake just turn down just to, I know he's selfish, I've heard this. By the way, you didn't have to tell us, we knew, all right? All your albums are about you, all right? But I'm like, can we just tone it down just a little bit? And then sometimes it would be great because Katie, and she'd be like, hey, she'll always check me. She's like, are you good? So I'm good. And what she means by that is, you're not going to fall asleep? I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm wide open. She's like, I'm going to take a little nap. Like, yeah, take your nap. And then she'll take a nap. And the music, but then the moment she's out, I'll just cut it off. And I'll just cruise. And then she'll wake up and she's like, my God. I'm like, no, it's amazing, isn't it? Just silence. Silence. But for the longest time, I was always kind of afraid of stillness and silence. And I think we have to ask why. Are we believing the lie that I produce, therefore I am? If the studies are right, we can only bear 15 seconds of silence. Well, and if you don't get yours all week, maybe we should do it now. Was it so bad? As one writer said, all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. Did you hear that? All of humanity's problems stem from humans' inability to sit quietly in a room alone. Father, we'll reworded the prayer, and this is our benediction. This is our close. He worded like this: Eternal Spirit, Earth Maker, Pain Bearer, Life Giver, source of all that is and all that shall be, Father and Mother of us all, loving God, in whom is heaven. The hallowing of your name echo through the universe. The way of your justice be followed by the peoples of the world. Your heavenly will be done by all created beings. Your commonwealth of peace and freedom sustain our hope and come on earth. With the bread we need for today, feed us. In the hurts we absorb from one another, forgive us. In times of temptation and test, strengthen us. From trials too great to endure, spare us. From the grip of all that is evil, free us. For you reign in the glory of the power that is love, now and forever. Amen. Vinings Lake, I hope you find a practice of grounding. Peace be with you. We'll see you next Sunday.